Welcome to Story Night, the City of Boise's cultural ambassador, where you hear true stories on a perceptive theme recorded live in Boise, Idaho. I'm Artistic Director Jodi Eichelberger. In this podcast, curated storytellers are intermixed with a spontaneous community story slam. Today's featured stories are from Michael Zabel, Andrew Nemr, and Kris Query. This season, our themes are based on the pieces from a chess game. And now it's time to charge forward with the night. Good evening. I'm Jodi Eichelberger. I am the artistic director of Story Night and your host this evening. It's so lovely to have you here. I do also want to thank our interpreters. Right now we have Sierra McIver, who I believe has been on maternity leave for a little bit. New little baby. Yes. Excited to have you back. And we are very grateful to the city of Boise, who almost 2 years ago appointed Story Night as the City of Boise Cultural Ambassador, which was a very nice honor to have, yeah. And the mayor appointed us because she appreciated how Story elevates the stories of all different kinds of people. And part of the city's mission is to be a city for everyone. If you've been following any news recently, all are welcome has kind of been a big phrase, yes. And it's a good goal, and we have that goal too, to be a place where anyone can come share a story. However, it's not always easy, and it's not always comfortable. It reminds me actually of where I most recently lived in Brooklyn. I lived in a co-op building, and you have to interview to get into those buildings. And you might imagine like Knights of the Round Table, this grand interview with the board of directors. Yes, we want you to be part of our kingdom. However, it was down in the basement. There were fly papers hanging from the ceiling and full of flies. Some of them had not found the fly paper yet, so they were also buzzing around our heads. And we were accepted into that building, and we had most recently been living in Portland, Oregon, which has a different vibe than New York City. One of the things we thought would be really great, so our building was an old Art Deco building, pre-war, had a great view of the bay, really lovely. It had about 50 apartments that were in that. It was 6 floors. And we thought, gosh, here we are in this building. Wouldn't it be great if we just invited everyone to visit us in our apartment now that we're here? And we'll just say, hey, everybody, come meet your new neighbors. We're on the 5th floor in 5F. And that sounded like a great idea. And what we very quickly, well, at first it was okay. Our next door neighbor that we shared a wall with came over, and she was like, oh, you're so exotic. You have such interesting accents. Do I have an accent? Yes, you do. And it was interesting getting to know her. It kind of, what we quickly realized is it's okay to just say hi to people in the hallway. In 2010, I was between projects and decided I would up my civic duty by becoming a quality assurance crew leader for the 2010 census. And I used that same Knights of the Round Table basement room as our headquarters for our team. Well, at that time, I had no idea that the census was so controversial, that it was like a political thing. And my neighbor, who I shared a wall with, had a fit. And actually, had later, after the board had switched, and I was on the board at the time, but I'd gotten approval from our building manager. I got approval from the rest of the board, just to have the crew meetings down in the basement. And she worked to make sure that I was penalized for abuse of the building. And I told them, listen, I got this all approved. I'm not paying a financial penalty for this. It was all in the clear. You can't reverse it now. So they were right. They said, all right, well, we have to appease your neighbor. So what if we do this? You just pay the super to plant a tree under the fire escape. And we found a free tree. So I don't know if she was appeased or not, but that's what we did. And so all are welcome isn't always easy, but we do try to make space for everyone. One of the ways we do that, and even with this simple story that I just told, you might mention that I didn't tell everyone that you should also buy into a co-op. I didn't give you the history of co-ops. It is my story, and that's what we encourage from everyone who shares tonight too, and you will have the opportunity to do that at our Slammer booth over there. The March show, which we are at now, is kind of a special one for me. I mean, it is also a little overwhelming and a little strange, but this show marks my 10th anniversary hosting Story Night. I just saw that my niece is here, and she didn't even exist in this world when I started hosting Story. So it's been quite a trip. This show is also special because 5 years ago, this was the show that we suddenly had to shut down because of the pandemic. And at that time, we believed it was a 2-week quarantine. So we made a quick pivot, just like the knight in chess. It goes forward and then turns quickly. So we were just a couple of weeks from the show when we got the word that we weren't going to be able to be live. So we quickly turned it into what we called Story Webinite. And it happened from the snug in my house. I sat at a computer in this new platform that we were all learning about called Zoom. And we did the show. And hundreds of people tuned in to watch it. I had to learn. Someone said, well, Jodi looks a little panicked. And I did a little because I was the control room, the host, everything right there, and had to hope that everyone who was speaking that night had their computer and their microphones working and had to switch to the different places and without looking like I was looking at my computer. So it was a little nerve-wracking, but we did get to do some fun things. So one of the ideas, like tonight we have Biotzetik and the Basque choir here, which is super fun. But you'll notice their instruments are fairly portable, so we're able to have them here. What we thought we'd do with our Webinite is have an instrument that we couldn't normally have, which was the pipe organ. So our guest musician was at a church in Boise, at the organ, and we would flip to him for our special music. And at that time, we were doing a decades show because Story Night was it was our 10th season. So he was playing music from the 2010s on the organ, and then our audience had to do surveys to see if they could figure out what song it was that he was usually it was Lady Gaga, but we had some fun with that. And then we also got to meet some special guests. So for our 10th birthday show, we treated it like a 10th birthday, like what would 10-year-olds do? And we thought, well, they maybe would go see the zoo. And the zoo was closed to people as well, so people hadn't been there in a few days, and everyone was freaking out and couldn't get to the zoo. So we went and visited Vinny the warthog, who actually just recently passed this last October. So little memory for Vinny there. And he showed up on our screen, and his little zookeeper told his story. And that's something we don't normally do at our show. The slammers were kind of fun. They were all in their homes, and they would raise their virtual hand if they wanted to tell a slam. Some of the people didn't know what they were raising their hand for. The one I really appreciated is I think it was a group of refugees that had, or English as an ESL language class or something, that had signed on to be part of Story Night and was feeling extra participatory. And so when she heard raise your hand, she raised her hand and the camera switched to her and you just saw her face go, when she saw herself on the screen. And we just had this moment of silence, and she just kind of went, and I think I said something like, "This is more than you bargained for, isn't it?" And she's like, "Oh, yes, sorry, please, please." So we moved on to someone else, and that worked all right. Then after those couple of shows that were our web night, we had a little more time to plan. So we actually moved to a little soundstage in Boise and did basically a TV show. All of our themes were based on game shows. And there was a LED panel in the back. I could see 300 computers on the back screen. So it was almost like looking at your faces. One of the ones we talk about the most, though, is one screen that was over here. I kind of had to take a double take. It had a chicken on it. And the chicken was sitting in a little lounge chair that had holes cut out for its legs. It looked very comfortable. Unfortunately, its owners couldn't figure out how to turn their mic on, so we kept trying to ask them, like, why do you have a chicken in front of the camera? And we saw their feet moving along the bottom of the frame and sensed that they were trying to answer our question, but were not succeeding. So that was fun. But, all this time, we looked to the day that we thought, oh, boy, when we can get back together in person, it's going to be great. And we imagined just this, like, the opening of, maybe like Boise in the late 80s when Boise Town Square opened. And it was, there was like a ribbon, and it was like the entire valley had never heard of a mall before, or they'd only heard of malls. And so they rushed into the building. We imagined when we come back, there'll be people at the doors, and we'll rush back in to all be together again. And we'll just rejoice and be so happy that, yes, we're back in person, and we're together, and it's community, and we're here listening to stories. And that didn't really happen. And even with me, I'm not entirely sure I would be here tonight, except my name is on the poster. It is hard to get up and go places, harder than it was. And when people ask me for an in-person meeting, I'm almost like, oh, really? I have to take a shower and get dressed and go somewhere and look like something. And it's like a real effort. It's almost like a knight getting ready for the like as if I have to put on all of the armor to go somewhere. It's a real effort. Actually, I'm wearing jeans tonight, and I think this is the first time I've ever worn jeans to Story Night. Someone pointed out to me that I never wore a pair of jeans in high school, which is odd, but we'll explore that another time. So this is the first time I've worn jeans to Story Night, but it is chess related, actually. So these jeans are, if you must know, they're 32 regulars. This last December, I believe it was, the Grandmaster chess champion, Magnus Carlsen, forfeited his game because it is forbidden to wear jeans during the chess tournament. And rather than leave and change out of his jeans, I imagine him just like turning the table over and pieces flying everywhere. He probably just was like, I'm not doing the next match. So he left. And, we have a fan of this. Okay. Of jeans. Oh, okay. Yeah, go jeans. Magnus forfeited the game, and then later he put the jeans on eBay and labeled them with hashtag JeansGate, Grand Champion. 96 people bid on them. They sold for $36,192. And it was an anonymous buyer. They were 32 regulars, so I'll let you put the rest of the story together. All right, but tonight we are here to celebrate the chess piece, The Knight. And we are, first I do want to, part of the reason we're able to be here is, of course, because of our sponsors. So I do want to thank our season sponsor, Keenly. Thank you. And tonight we also have a show sponsor, and that is the Heart Space Center. First time sponsor. Thank you, Heart Space. And then do we have some story subscribers in the audience tonight? Story subscribers, here they are. These are our monthly supporters. Thank you to all of our story subscribers. And you can become a story subscriber by just typing story sub in your phone and texting it to 44321. I actually got it right this month. Story sub to 44321. The structure of the show. How many people are here for the first time? Have never been to Story Night? Wow, great. So the structure of the show tonight is 3 featured storytellers intermixed with a community story slam. To sign up as a slammer, you just visit our story booth. And there's Allison and Natalia there. Oh, it's Heather. Heather Rideau. Heather, thank you. I am nearsighted, so I did go to the eye doctor this week, but I haven't gotten my glasses. If you want to share a story, go and sign up, and you'll have the chance to be drawn 5-minute story on the theme night, whether that's like a knight in shining armor, or someone that you rescued, or maybe you were rescued. Our featured storytellers are a mix of self-submitted and curated stories. They are their stories as represented to us. They are true and happen to them in their lives. We, as Story Night, they are not our opinion. If Story Night has opinions, we don't represent or sponsor the stories in any way. They are just here to be shared as a part of their life. And I think probably it's time to bring those featured storytellers up on stage. I'm going to bring them up in reverse order. So the last one I call will be first up to the mic. And we have Kris Query, who gets off her high horse. Andrew Nemr gets knighted. And first up to the mic, suiting up to share his story, please welcome back to Story Night, Mr. Michael Zabel.
The armor that I wore as a teenager was bright, bold, and anything but conventional, much to the embarrassment of my little sister, Elisa. I had pieced it together from clothing that I found at yard sales and in thrift stores. I wore this clothing because it shielded me from the teasing and the fat jokes that I had endured in my childhood. I would rather attention be drawn to my quirky clothing than to my overweight body and my acne-ridden face. And I loved this armor. It made me feel proud and unique, and it set me apart from the lackluster style of my peers. Sorry. I felt like I had a flair for fashion, and being the only one of my mother's children who actually liked going to the fabric store with her, I decided that after high school, I would go to fashion school. My mom and I actually made the tuxedo that I wore to my senior prom. We made the coat out of a white jacquard fabric with little palm trees woven into the fabric, and the vest was red with the same motif with little gold palm trees in it. And this tuxedo was a hit at prom. Popular classmates that had never spoken to me before were coming up to me to compliment me on it. I was finally earning recognition for my unconventional style, and so I dreamed that I would move to the big city and become an iconic designer and go on to revolutionize the menswear industry. After high school, I transformed myself and I lost a lot of weight and I got rid of my acne, and I didn't need clothing anymore to protect me. Now it could just be be an instrument of my self-expression. I quickly learned that fashion school wasn't for me. As it turns out, it was more of a flair for shopping that I had and not necessarily a flair for fashion. And I also started noticing that being in fashion school compelled me to want to fit in instead of being proud of standing out. And so I switched my major and I started studying interior design. I could still play with fabric, just on a much larger scale. And this led me to getting a job as a buyer and a salesman at one of San Francisco's popular furniture stores called Therapy on the trendy Valencia Street. One of my coworkers there was Nate Woods. Nate and I became great friends, and together we created an energy in that store that was infectious. A customer would come into the store looking for a table lamp, and Nate and I would play off of one another until that customer was leaving with an entire new living room set. So one day, it's just Nate and I in the store, and it's a slow weekday afternoon, and this woman comes in, and she sees the two of us standing behind the counter, and she goes, "Oh, you're just what we're looking for. How would the two of you like to audition for a Men's Warehouse commercial?" This is not the strangest thing that has ever happened on Valencia Street, but not anything that we were expecting to happen to us that day. She goes on to explain that she's a casting director and that they are looking for average guys like us to audition. I think that's the word she used, average. But in my head, I'm thinking, maybe my mom was right after all. I am such a handsome man. And do you know what? Those Men's Warehouse executives, they're gonna see it too. And they're gonna make me their next spokesperson. And I'm going to go into that company and I'm gonna infiltrate it like a Trojan horse. And I'm finally going to achieve that dream of revolutionizing menswear from the inside out. And then I look over at Nate, and he's tall, classically handsome, and irresistibly charming. All of the women that come into the store flirt with him, and many of the men too. I mean, it is San Francisco. Standing next to him, I feel like LeFou from Beauty and the Beast, and he's Gaston. This woman is probably wanting him to audition and just offering me to join as well out of pity. All of my insecurities come back, and I am that ugly, fat teenager again. But then I remember that summer between high school and moving to San Francisco for college, I transformed myself. I lost all that weight, and I got rid of my acne, and I felt like I could do this. And so I looked at Nate and I said, "I dare you to do it. If you do it, I'll do it." And so we agreed. We were gonna go to this Men's Warehouse audition. On our way to the audition, we practiced for one another the famous Men's Warehouse tagline, "You're gonna like the way you look. I guarantee it." For some reason, we thought that was the only preparation that we would need to do for this audition. So we get to the address that the casting agent had given us, and we enter this big room, and it is full of men dressed head to toe in fly fishing gear. And they all stop from their fly fishing pantomimes to look Nate and I up and down as if they are assessing the abilities of an opponent. And it's clear that we are no threat, and so they go right back to their cast-offs. And right before Nate and I are about to retreat out of there, thinking that we came to the wrong place, the casting agent finds us, and she leads us into another room. And this room is full of gorgeous men in perfectly tailored suits. and beautiful women in perfectly fitted dresses. And to join them now are Nate and I, the only two who seem to be average. Everyone else looks like they are professional models. I am starting to worry, and then I think, you know what? Like, as long as Nate and I can go into this audition together, we can play off one another like we do in the store, and we will slay those executive dragons. I mean, if we can sell expensive furniture, we can sell suits. And then they start calling us in 3 at a time. They ask for one of the male models, we'll call him Chad. They ask for one of the female models, we'll call her Vanessa. And then they ask for me, LeFou. I look at Nate with panic in my eyes. This is not the way this was supposed to happen. We're supposed to go into battle together. But it's too late, and I follow Chad and Vanessa into the studio. And we stand in front of a panel of directors and producers and executive dragons. And I look over at Vanessa and Chad, and they look perfect in the studio lighting. And I am insecure again. The director, who's this British guy, he starts with Chad, and he asks Chad, describe to me how you see modern menswear. And then he asks Chad, and tell me why you chose to wear the suit that you're wearing today. Chad's answers are as flawless as he is. And then the director moves to Vanessa, and his prompt is a little different for Vanessa. He says, now look at Vanessa and describe Chad's look for me. And Vanessa, also a professional, has nothing but flattering and charming things to say about Chad. And then the director says, okay, Vanessa, now look at Michael and describe Michael's look for me. Everybody turns to look at me, and I want to throw up. I feel like a pawn in their game and not the knight in shining armor that I thought I would be. And what made it worse was I was not wearing my self-preserving armor that I usually wore. I had toned down my quirky style to just look average. Vanessa did her best to describe me. It wasn't as flattering as it was for Chad, but, you know, she's a professional. And then the director turns to me and says, okay, Michael, tell me how you see modern men's fashion. And I couldn't tell him that I found modern men's fashion to be constricting and bland. And so I mumbled some stupid answer. And then he asked me why I chose to wear what I was wearing, and I couldn't tell him that it was just the most ordinary thing that I owned. And I mumbled another answer, and I just was ready to get out of there. And thankfully, they finally released us, and I got out. And I waited outside for Nate while he went in to do his audition. So Nate comes outside to meet me when he's done, and we talk about our auditions. And his audition went the same way that mine did. It seemed like they had pitted him against 2 professional models as well. And his embarrassing moment came when the British director asked him, so why are you wearing braces? And Nate says that he smiled really big and said, I don't wear braces. And the British director says, no. In England, we call suspenders braces. Why are you wearing suspenders? And Nate proudly says, well, one of my friends has great style. And he's always wearing suspenders. And so I wore the suspenders. And in that moment, my insecurities and my embarrassment vanished. I was that friend. I was always wearing colorful suspenders and bow ties at that time. It turns out that somebody showed up to that battle in my armor. It just wasn't me. Neither Nate and I were cast in a Men's Wearhouse commercial. And I didn't revolutionize menswear. But Nate, somebody who I really admire, showing up to audition, emulating me, That was definitely a win. And I still battle my insecurities, and I fight a battle between wanting to fit in and wanting to stand out. But now I show up to that battle wearing armor that is bold, bright, and 100% mine. And I like the way I look.
Musical interlude? Do you have a little musical interlude? Michael, have you ever touched a pair of $36,000 jeans?
They're revolutionary.
God, I hate Chad and Vanessa. You know, we all knew that we weren't supposed to make fun of kids who were overweight, but somehow it seemed like it was okay to make fun of kids who were skinny, which was me. So I often felt really threatened and unhappy because when people would make fun of how skinny I was, my toothpick legs and the bone sticking out of the side of my knee. And we also used to be very congratulatory when we would notice people who have dropped a lot of weight, like, wow, look at you, amazing, you look incredible, good work, good job. Lately, I have noticed some of my neighbors losing weight, and I haven't been so congratulatory as I have been suspicious. Did you work for this, or is it just, you know? Doesn't seem like as much of an effort, maybe. I don't know. It's not my own experience, so. All right. You guys play a little music while our slammer ticket comes up here. Oh, you're looking very mysterious. Hands behind your back, wearing your red beret. Oh, it's in the beret. All right, well, let me search around. All right, and coming up to the mic is Ben Smith. Ben, come on up. Oh, we get to raise the mic for Ben. Ben, have you told a story here before? All right, first time. You have you got 5 minutes to share a story that hopefully is inspired by Night.
Okay.
It is a family audience, as I mentioned. My 9-year-old niece is in the audience tonight. She's very advanced for her age, but
Okay.
yeah. Okay. All right, and if you start to run over time, I'm going to move like the Night piece. I'll come from my chair straight up, and then I will take a sudden turn and slide into you.
Okay. All right. Thank you. This is wild. I wasn't expecting this at all. It's a tough act to follow with this. It's a great story. Let's see here. I wasn't expecting to be picked, so I was still ruminating on what story I would share. Let's see. Once upon a time, about 10 years back, I was a long-haul truck driver driving coast to coast between New York and LA for night trucking, which is about the only night theme you're going to get. But I enjoyed listening to podcasts and audiobooks, just driving on the I-40, and was perplexed at the state of the world. This was about 2015, 2016. And I was like, you know what? I'm a good problem solver. I should apply myself to these complex systemic issues that I see in the world. I was like, no, I'm really cozy in my truck. I'm gonna just stay here and watch movies and listen to strange audiobooks. And but eventually I realized I wouldn't be able to live with myself if I didn't at least attempt to apply myself to some of the systemic inadequacies that I would see in the world. And I had been a mathematics major and a philosophy major and a few other majors in college. So I thought, you know what, I know a thing or two, I'll take a crack at this. And over a long, tumultuous couple of years, I ended up working for some really interesting think tanks, applying ourselves to systemic thinking and looking at all of the underlying dynamics at work behind a lot of the conflict and inequity that we see in the world, and was able to do some good. It was really wild. And turns out that one of the best things you can do that actually make a difference is gathering people together with events like this. That really actually makes a huge difference. And so yeah, give everyone a hand here. Honestly. My friend that I came here with, Jason Sears, does a Village Co project that gathers people together in a unique way. I've worked with other various projects. I just was on a Zoom earlier today, gathering people together, and there's just so many endless diverse ways to gather people and find similar interests and do neighborhood projects or running groups or book clubs or Dungeons and Dragons, and it's been some of the funnest times that I've had. I just hosted a conversation with a Peruvian regenerative community a few hours ago, and so that was really fun. I was in Peru a few months ago doing ayahuasca, which is a hell of an experience. And the answers to all these very complex problems, I was so amazed at how simple the solution is. And it's just gathering with people. And I'm always reminded of that translation of Namaste, which translates roughly to when the light in me recognizes the light in you. And I just love those moments where you can find some similar camaraderie in someone that you might not have expected. And events like this are perfect at that. And so this is literally my first time here, and I am so thrilled to be a part of it. And thank you for inviting me here.
Thank you, Ben. Wow, what a brave person. First time here, he went straight up to the booth, put his name in. I have driven I-84 many, many times and looked in my rear view mirror and saw a trucker behind me, and I did not imagine that they were thinking about the inequities of the world. I've grown a little bit tonight, which is great. I want to also acknowledge we have another interpreter up here. This is Lavona Andrew. And the other fun thing about having the Basque musicians here tonight is I'm actually fifth generation Boise, and my grandparents' home on Broadway Avenue across from Garfield Elementary is now the Basque preschool. And my grandmother was the cook at Garfield, the head cook, for many, many years. Kids were always a part of her life. And so when my grandparents passed, we were kind of pleased that the house would still have children and be connected to education. And as I think, if I understand correctly, it's the only Basque preschool outside of Basque country.
In the States, at least.
In the United States. Okay, well, I guess, that's still pretty big. Thanks for crushing my dreams. Speaking of dreams, our next featured storyteller is all about them. So we are super excited to have him speak at Story Night for the first time. Please welcome Andrew Nemr.
How does one even do that? That's the question that I get every time I share my upcoming project. A 12-hour improvised solo tap dance performed from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m., designed to bring the idea of the dark night of the soul to life. The dark night of the soul, that time when the things that we use to orient ourselves to the world get stripped away, often without warning. I get asked again, how are you going to prepare for that? Frankly, I don't really know. I'm going to prepare the same way that I prepare for any other show. You don't really get specified prep time ahead of a dark night of the soul. And to be clear, tap dancing for 12 hours, I think, is going to be easier than some of the other things that I've gone through. I'm 9 years old. I'm sitting in the back of the movie theater. I'm waiting for the opening night screening of the movie Tap. The film features icons Sammy Davis Jr., Gregory Hines, and an up-and-coming Savion Glover. The lights dim, and the film begins to screen. I'm not a stranger to tap dancing. My parents, immigrants from Lebanon who fled the civil war there in the 1970s, thought it a good idea for their only child, me, to do something with other kids. So at 3.5 years old, I sign up for dance class at Chris Collins' dance studio. By the time I'm sitting in this theater, I've already cut my teeth on the dance competition circuit. Think lots of sequins, makeup, and jazz hands. I know who all the heavy hitters are, and you can't get any heavier than Sammy Davis Jr., Gregory Hines, and Savion Glover. There's a scene in the movie called the challenge scene, in which Gregory Hines gets schooled by a bunch of old tap dancers. These are living legends. In the scene, all the old cats line up in a circle, and one by one, the likes of Arthur Duncan, Jimmy Slide, Bunny Briggs, Steve Condos, Harold Nicholas, and Sandman Sims each come out and take turns showing off. They're all egging each other on, celebrating one another. It was the quintessential vision of brotherly love for this only child. I wanted nothing more than to be a part of that circle. I fell in love. I tell my parents I want to become a tap dancer and meet Gregory Hines. I had found my life goal, and I had a plan. I gave myself 30 years to do it. I figured it would take 30 years to become a tap dancer, have a successful career, and bump into Gregory Hines at an industry party. At which point, I would tell him my entire life story and how he was my inspiration. I'm 10 years old. It's a year after seeing the movie Tap, and I'm meeting Gregory Hines. I meet Savion Glover the same day. The two of them are teaching workshops in New York City, and my parents are willing to sign me up and drive me the 5.5 hours we needed to get there just so I could take these 2 classes. I nearly have a nervous breakdown on the way. My plan has been fast-tracked, and I'm running 29 years ahead of schedule. Gregory and Savion take a liking to me and eventually become my mentors. I work with Savion, I perform with Gregory Hines over the next couple years. But there was more. They saw fit to introduce me to their mentors. I got to meet most of the cats that I saw in that challenge scene. I got called out for my talent. Gregory would call me out for keeping my feet really close to the floor but still getting all my sounds. Savion would call me out for remembering everything that he taught, even when he forgot it. We started using nicknames. Gregory Hines turned into Greg. Savion Glover turned into Save. Instead of calling me Andrew, they started calling me Drew. It was as if I had been knighted. Eventually, Savion invited me to join a company called Real Tap Skills. It was an all-male tap dance troupe that he was starting. I learned from him, I toured with him, I was even featured on television with him. If I had any questions about what was going on, I could talk to Greg. Like a hip uncle, I reached out to Greg when I was going through my first breakup. We shared music and an affinity for Apple computers. I was living my best life. Savion was like the older brother that I always wanted and never had. Greg was a super hip uncle. I was hanging out with tap dance royalty on a daily basis. I had the unending support of my parents, and I had experienced the real-life embrace of love that I had witnessed in the challenge scene. I'm 15 years old. After a show that Real Tap Skills does in New York City, I get a call. It's Savion's agent. She says, "Andrew, get ready. Something big is about to happen, and I want you to be a part of it. But you have to be ready." Turns out the show was like a test for a big-time producer-director, and things were moving. A summer goes by, nothing. A couple months later, I get an invitation to the opening night premiere of Bringing the Noise, Bringing the Funk on Broadway. There's real tap skills on the stage, beautifully expressing the story of African Americans through tap dancing. And I am in the audience, unable to be with them. There simply wasn't space for me, a Lebanese, Canadian, American, hairy white boy, in that show. I spiral. If I can't be in the show, can I even be a tap dancer? Having a hip uncle is cool, but I miss my brother. I had achieved my life goal, I met all the cats, and didn't know what the next step was supposed to be. In one of our only conversations during this time, Savion tried to give me advice. I have to do this, you do what you have to do. I didn't get it. I thought what I had to do was be with him, and that simply wasn't possible. For the next few years, I flail. I go to every tap dance gathering I could. I tried out for things as a soloist. Nothing felt right. Alone in my room at home, I would turn off the lights, blast some music, and wail on this 4x4 piece of plywood. Everything that came out of me reminded me of Savion. I couldn't escape his impact on me. Frankly, I didn't want to. Maybe what I have to do is just keep tap dancing. I'm 23 years old. I'm at a birthday party, and the phone rings. It's Greg. This is unusual because I normally call him. I pick up. Hey, are you alone? No. Can you get to a place where you can be alone? His voice was serious. Yeah, hold on. Give me a second. I excuse myself and I go to a quiet room. Okay, I'm alone now. What's up? Andrew, I want to bring you in. But what I'm about to tell you, you can't tell anyone. Even somebody that you think I would have already told. I have cancer. Within 2 months, Greg is gone. It's a surprise for many. His presence in the tap dance world was undeniable. We organized ourselves around him. And now that he was gone, that world was shifting. I could feel myself spiraling again. But this time, something was different. Greg had trusted me. Turns out I was only one of a handful of people that he had told he was sick. I began to trust myself. I went straight into the studio just to see what would come out. I wanted to remember Greg's impact on my life, and I knew that I could find it in my dancing. It's 20 years later, and I'm reeling. I'm going through the breakup of a 2-year relationship. My friend group has spectacularly exploded in an irreparable way, and I'm sitting with my dad. For the past 2 days, we've been talking about life. I'm asking him all the questions that I wish I had. How did you know that mom was the one for you? What was it like navigating the world as an immigrant? What were your hopes for the family, for me? These are all the questions that I probably should have asked him in my 20s. Maybe I did and I just wasn't listening. I'm listening now. He shares, well, the night before our wedding day, I got scared. My dad doubted. Leaving Lebanon, we didn't really know what we were doing. We just tried to do what we thought was good and right. Wait, my dad didn't just have the answers? Keeping the family together was the most important thing for me, and for you, I wanted you to have the opportunity to do whatever it is that you loved. For the first time, I saw my dad as human. Someone with dreams, challenges, and just trying to work it all out. My dad was more of an action guy than a word guy, so these conversations were extra special. The next day, he was gone. Unexpectedly, quickly, gone. I'm 43 years old. When I was young and my dad would travel, he would look at me and say, "Okay, Andrew, you're the man of the house now. You take care of Mom until I get back." When I used to think about that, I would laugh. Imagine me, 7 years old, in charge of the house. Turns out it was never really a joke to my dad. He actually trusted me with the family. It's 2 years later, and I'm planning the biggest project of my career, a 12-hour solo improvised tap dance from 7 p.m. to 7 a.m., designed to bring the idea of the dark night of the soul to life. I know a little something about the dark night now. The 3 most formative men in my life aren't with me anymore. I'll step on the stage and I'll start dancing. I won't stop for 12 hours. I don't know exactly what will happen. You kinda don't in the dark. But something's different now. I've been entrusted with the care of my family, with the burdens of my friends, and with the choices of my own heart. Tap dancing for 12 hours? Yeah, that's gonna be easy in comparison. Thank you.
We're gonna do something a little special here tonight. We're inviting Biotzetik back up on stage, and they, of course, are Basque, and as Andrew mentioned, Bring in the Noise, Bring in the Funk was about the African-American experience. There wasn't room for a Lebanese, Canadian-American, hairy white boy in that show, but we have made room for a Lebanese, Canadian-American, hairy white boy to participate with the Basque choir. And at the end of the show, I do a song to our theme song, and that we say authentic, inspiring, spontaneous. This is going to be spontaneous. This has not been rehearsed. So the tambourine is stepping aside for a moment, and Andrew is replacing the tambourine with his tap shoes. But they haven't had a chance to do it together, so you are eyewitnesses for the very first collaboration. So let's see what happens. Nemr and Biotzetik. Just a little preview of his 12-hour performance, which will be happening August 8th at Trika, and you can find information about that on Andrew's website. In case you're not aware of this, we are extraordinarily lucky to have a talent like this living in Boise, Idaho. I mean, it's quite amazing. And Andrew and I have a long history together. He actually first came to Boise as part of a residency program that I run called Searle's Place, and then eventually moved here and told a story in TAP. That was, back in 2015, so 10 years ago again. And eventually looked to relocate and remembered us fondly, I guess. So here he is. Boy, how do we follow that? Well, with a message from our season sponsor. And this is where I typically invite our ensemble to play some music to underscore the sponsor message. Now, this could be all of you together, or if we want to single out the guitar, or so he can do some solo strumming. I'm looking for insurance music. Looks like the guitar has been nominated. Yes, this is a good start. I like it. Safe, yet you're not sure. Employee health benefits can feel like a nightmare. Insurance humor there. Costs spiraling faster than a Swiftie grabbing concert tickets. Transparency as elusive as looking for Waldo at a Renaissance fair. And your team feeling like a pawn in someone else's game. Are you frustrated by employees saying, I don't know why I have insurance. It never seems to cover what I need. Why cover only your king when you can cover all the players? At KNiGHT, we design benefits programs that actually work so your team sees the value, not just the deductions. Sure, we might not have a castle or armor, but we are champions of transparency and innovation so you can have smarter benefits. Because in the employee benefits game, you don't need a fairy tale. Forget the white horse. In this game, strategy wins. With KNiGHT by your side, you'll make bold moves that protect your people and strengthen your bottom line. It's your move. Make it KNiGHT. All right. We are going to take a bit of a break here, but there are some things you can do during the break. You can, of course, refresh your drinks back at the bar. You can visit our show sponsor, Heart Space Center, out in the lobby area. And also out in the lobby area, our friends here at Jump have set up a StoryCorps booth. It's a project that they did a while ago where they animated some stories, and there's little headphones and stuff there, so you can check that out there. And during intermission, if you were in here, we're going to enjoy some more music by Biotzetik, and we'll be back in about 10 minutes, so enjoy the break.
Yep.
Thank you again to Biotzetik. And we're going to start our second act here.
Are we done?
With a special featured song. But before we get to that, I want to introduce you to the president of the choir, Janice Mayville.
Yes, Janice Mayville. Hi. I know a couple people out here. Hi. As we've heard, there's a variety of different ways of looking about nights in, this evening. And so we're here to share one from more of the Basque perspective, and it's a little more literal of night than it is of some of the other topics that we've had. So a little Basque history lesson. In very early times, landowners in the Basque region, so think farmers, landowners, were considered lords, protectors of the land. Many Basques were not ruled by monarchs or part of kingdoms, but rather by a democratic system where the lords, again, think farmers, would meet periodically to discuss issues and agree to solutions that benefited their communities. These meetings of the lords also called General Assemblies, were the legislative body of 4 Basque provinces or territories. They weren't provinces, they were territories. And they lived peacefully beside other non-Basque territories that were primarily ruled by monarchies. A side fact, John Adams, one of our US founders and president of the United States, visited the Basque region in the 1700s to study how the Basques managed their democracy and communities. Were the Basques the founders of the US democracy? One will never know. So back to the Basque story. Eventually, kingdoms located near the Basque region became involved in territorial struggles. And while there are political divisions as a result, we know that there is a distinct cultural Basque identity which spans across borders and includes Basque traditions like the unique Basque language, which in Basque is euskera, which we are singing in tonight, and many other traditions which are all a testimony to our ancient Basque democracy. So our featured song is Mendidik Mendi. It's a song that commands Basque mountaineers, or are they knights, to awaken Basque neighbors in a cry for freedom and togetherness, calling to them from mountain to mountain and farmhouse to farmhouse.
Thank you. I also do want to point out, too, Phoebe, just stand up for one more second. This is Phoebe Caranjala, who signed the Basque performance that you just heard, and she is a student from the Idaho State University in the interpretation program, which is taught by our other interpreter, Lavona Andrew. And she volunteered to do a little project, and so we thought, what could be simpler than doing ASL for a Basque folk song? Nice job. As Janice was talking about the lords and the ladies, I was looking out the window here, and I'm seeing what I've been lovingly referring to as the Eye of Mordor directly across from us, but I'm also seeing what I guess the new lords of Boise, which are these folks that are sitting under those twinkly lights on the top floor of Arthur over there, from their luxury apartments, looking through the window at us peasants here, listening to stories at Jump. Welcome back to Night. It's not too late to sign up at the Slammer booth, so be sure and do that. Before we get to a Slammer, though, who should I pick on this? Maybe I can pick on my button player tonight. Do you call yourself a button player or an accordionist, or?
A tricky Tisha player.
Awesome.
A tricky Tisha player. That third word was the one I had the most trouble with. So we have a special show sponsor message, and our show sponsor has taken the trouble to, it appears to me, write some lyrics. So I wonder if you might just play me some chords, like play a chord and hold it, I'll do a little something, and then play a new chord and hold it, and I'll do a little something, and we'll see if we can make this lyrical. Does that sound all right? Okay, let's try it. Everybody has a story to tell, written in the heart, the mind, the shell. Like a knight in armor, we carry it all, bearing weight even when it may be ready to fall. At the Heart Space Center, we hear your tale, helping your body release and set sail. Move by move, just like the night, we work with you, so you may shine bright. Your body speaks, we're here to listen, holding space as we work through what might be missing. From armor to ease, the Heart Space Center is where you can welcome body, mind, and spirit through movement, healing, and breath. Yes, please. The Heart Space Center offers various trauma-informed healing modalities for private clients and groups. Their offerings range from somatic experiencing, which is a gentle yet profound approach to healing trauma in the body, to yoga, to meditation and breath work. Hopefully you visited their lobby to learn more, and they also have a raffle that they're doing. You'll get an extended early bird rate exclusive for tonight's Story Story Night guests on their 6-week deep dive coming up in May. Only a couple spots remaining. You can also sign up to join their newsletter for a chance to win Heart Space Center swag and $25 in credit towards any Heart Space Center offering. The Heart Space Center is where you can welcome body, mind, and spirit through movement, healing, and breath. Yes, please. Namaste. Thank you. Thank you very much. All right, let's get another slammer up here, which probably means that beautiful red beret. And it looks like Heather's bringing it up this time, if I'm remembering correctly. All right, who will be our first storyteller in Act 2 for KNiGHT? Thank you. And this is a person who I believe has told a story before, and I don't have a great memory, but what I remember about this person's story is it had something to do about their underwear. I hope it's true, otherwise this will be an awkward moment that's coming up. Please welcome Ophelia Ramirez. Ophelia. That, of course, was at our late night show because we don't tell stories about underwear at our for the lords above us here at the Arthur. Am I making that up, Ophelia? Oh!
There was a story about my underwear. I'm not going to tell it tonight, though. Wow, that's bright. You know, this is the second time that I'm going to tell a story. The first time was maybe November, October of last year, and it was at the Collective, and it was such that I couldn't see the audience, so it was easy to tell the story. I can see all of you. And it's a little nerve-wracking, so stay with me, okay? I met my knight in Berlin in 1990. In 1990, my husband and I were living in San Francisco, and we decided we wanted to go to Berlin because the wall had just come down. The wall had been down for 6 months, and we thought, well, let's go because we want to see East Berlin before the West moves in and it's not East Berlin anymore. So we went to East Berlin, and being from San Francisco, you know, we were foodies, well, we still are, and so we wanted to go and have a really nice cocktail. So we researched and we thought, you know, this was the place we were gonna go. So we had been in Germany for a while, and I was tired of beer, which is when you go to Germany, it's really exciting. Those first couple of beers, they're great. And then it's too heavy and too much. So I didn't know what else to order, so I ordered a screwdriver. And I thought, you know, orange juice, vodka, what could go wrong? So our waiter was very nice. He took down my order. My husband had another beer, and he brings our order. And I can tell by the color of the screwdriver that something's really wrong. And so I took a sip, and I turned to my husband, and I said, babe, I think this is Tang. Tang and orange juice. And so we called the waiter over, and I said, you know, I was hoping that I could get fresh orange juice. And the waiter very, very seriously said, oh yes, very fresh, made this morning. So he was not my knight in shining armor. We wanted to go to a really good restaurant. So we went to this restaurant that had really great reviews. And we noticed that on the menu, when they brought us our food, lots of canned vegetables. And we had been, you know, walking around the streets, and we knew that there was a lot of fresh vegetables out in the stalls in the street. So we called our waiter over, and we asked him, why did we have canned vegetables? And again, very, very honestly and earnestly, he explained that fresh vegetables were for peasants, and canned vegetables were for rich people. So he was not my knight in shining armor. We were walking the streets of Berlin, and we were near the wall that partially had come down. And Peter and I looked at each other, my husband Peter, and we looked at each other and we said, is that Pink Floyd? Is that Pink Floyd? And we talked to people, and yes, Pink Floyd was singing their album, The Wall, at the wall. How cool is that, right? And we just happened to be walking by. Well, we couldn't get in, there were no tickets, but we stood there and listened to Pink Floyd play The Wall at the wall, which was really cool. So maybe they were kind of my knight in shining armor, but I didn't meet them, so they weren't really. We were going to leave Berlin, and so we got up early because we were going to catch a train, and we got in the cab, and the cab driver was from West Berlin and didn't really know East Berlin, and that's where our train was. And he kept going all these circuitous routes, and we're looking at our watch, and the train's going to leave, and we have to get there. We finally somehow got there, and we grabbed our luggage, leaped out, ran in, and tried to figure out what track we were on. And as we get there, the train is barely beginning to leave. Just, that first few little turns of the wheel. Well, my husband and I just start running, and my poor husband has the bulk of our luggage. He's bigger and stronger, and I have a couple little things. And I run and I jump on, and Peter is throwing luggage on, and the train is going faster, and he's starting to run faster. And just as the train really starts to go, Peter puts his foot out, and a man puts his hand out and grabs Peter and pulls him on, and the train takes off. He was my knight in shining armor.
Ophelia, would you go to our booth and sign up for a train ticket? It's the release. No, you do have to go there and sign our release, yeah. Some of the things I say are actually real. You know, I've heard that if you play The Wizard of Oz backwards, you see the fall of the Berlin Wall. I love the problems with food in other countries, particularly menu translations. I don't remember which country this was. I do remember that when I was in India, the clothes you would buy at the store were for fancy people, and the peasants, as Ophelia just said, you would just get them custom made by a tailor. Which I thought was amazing. But it seemed like we had a place where we went down to the lobby of the hotel, and it said, or the restaurant hotel, and it said, "Special today, no ice cream." And the only thing I could think is that ice cream must be terrible for that to be the special. But there was a comic, I think it was on the Graham Norton show, actually, that they did a whole list of menu items which killed Stanley Tucci, who was one of the guests. And one of them, it was like a buffet that had little signs of what everything was. And one of them they gave up on, and it just said whatever. And another one said a variety of opinions. I wonder if anyone ever got a second helping of that. So we've had some first-time storytellers tonight. We've had some storytellers rejoin us tonight. One of the things that makes me very happy about Story Night and our round table is how many people have stayed and been a part of our table for so many years. One of those people actually is in our audience right here, Allison Haas, who is one of the original board members of Story Night, who was there when was instrumental in us becoming a nonprofit. And a person who was there with her at that time, at that founding board member, is our last featured storyteller tonight. So please welcome back to the Story Night stage, Kris Query.
When I was in high school, we had this really amazing journalism teacher. She was so funny and sarcastic, really good with the students. And I think I considered her actually more of a friend than a teacher. After I graduated from high school and went off to college, we still stayed in touch, sending letters and birthday cards. After a couple years, she got a teaching job in Montana, moved there, and got married. One day I received a letter from her, and she told me that she'd had a baby and lost it to SIDS. And I was a Christian at the time, and so I whipped out my Bible and my mighty pen, and I looked up some Bible verses. And then I said things like, "This is God's will, and God has a plan for you, and God is in control." And then he ended up, with thoughts and prayers. And what was lacking in that letter was any sort of empathy or sympathy and words of comfort and any acknowledgement of her pain. Just Bible verses and platitudes. And it ended up kind of feeling like, well, God wanted this, so what are you going to do? And I never heard from her again. Imagine that. I sent her a couple of letters, and she never responded, and eventually we fell out of touch. And I have regretted that letter for 40 years. I have so wanted to just tell her personally how sorry I was that I wasn't more kind and empathetic, and that just like the knight on a chessboard that goes straight on one path and then takes a sharp turn, that my life had been on a very straight and narrow conservative path, and it had taken a sharp turn. I was no longer a Christian, I was an atheist, and I no longer believed that there was a God who controlled these situations, or I didn't believe in God's will. And again, I just, wanted to tell her how sorry I was for the words in that letter. But as time passed, I felt like the opportunity to ask for forgiveness had passed as well. But then I went on a trip to South Korea, and that kind of changed how I thought about things. My sister is a Korean adoptee, and so in March of 2023, 17 family and extended family members flew to Seoul to meet some of her birth family and to tour the country. One of our first stops was in Gwangju, which is the site of the infamous Gwangju uprising of 1980. We started the tour on the 10th floor of the provincial building, where 245 bullets fired from machine guns on helicopters are preserved in the interior and exterior walls of the building. We listened quietly as the tour guide told us the story of General Chun Du-won, who took over the country in a military coup and declared martial law. I thought about my own country and its fragile democracy, and thought about that when she talked about how he had arrested opposition leaders, closed the university, and suppress the media. When 200,000 students and civilians then protested in the square, he brought in tanks and machine guns and helicopters and opened fire on the protesters, killing up to 2,000 people and effectively ending the uprising. While we were listening to the story, 3 Korean gentlemen entered the room. One was in his 20s, the other 2 were a little older and more distinguished looking. I thought it was kind of odd because up till then it was just our tour group that had been in the room. And they listened respectfully and they read some of the placards, and then she was done with her speech, and so then we all moved into the next room where there was a film playing that had actual footage of the uprising. And they were sitting on a bench, and I was standing about 4 feet away. And when the film ended, they left, and we went up to the observation deck, where you could look out across the square and just kind of imagine the horror of that day. Pretty soon the tour guide came over to me and my sister, and she said, "The young man that came into the room is the grandson of General Chung Du-won. He has come here today to apologize to the country for the actions of his grandfather and to meet with some of the mothers of the students that were killed that day. This is the first time that anyone in the family has ever acknowledged the of how he ordered the massacre that day, of his wrongdoing. The rest of the family just still thinks that he's a war hero. And as I watched the grandson walk across the square to go meet with the mothers, I thought about two things. The first was that I was standing 4 feet away from someone who had the courage to apologize to an entire country for someone else's wrongdoing. I felt like I had become a part of history. The second thing I thought of was that he'd had the courage to apologize to an entire nation for somebody else's wrongdoing. After that, I spent a lot of time thinking about the words "I'm sorry" and what forgiveness means, not just in general, but, personally. And that's what brought me back around to the situation with my teacher. And I thought, maybe it wasn't too late to make things right. So I decided that I would track her down and apologize. And Google actually gave me an address, but I didn't know how old it was. I didn't know if she would still live there. And honestly, I didn't know how she would feel about seeing me after all these years of not having any communication. But I decided I was going to go anyway. So I drove 8 hours to a small town outside of Missoula. And I drove down this gravel road out in the country, and I saw this address, this house, but I just kept on driving. And I was just so afraid of how she was going to respond to me. But eventually I pulled over and I said, "We've come this far." And so I found the courage to turn around and drive up the driveway, get out of my car, go up, knock on the door. And this woman who appeared to be in her 70s answered the door. And I said, "I don't know if I have the right address, but I am looking for Diana Smith." And she looked at me curiously and she said, "I'm Diana Smith." And I said, "Well, I'm Kris Query." And she just erupted with joy. She was so happy to see me. She just pulled me in the house and was so excited. And I said, "Wait, so before anything, I just want you to know that I'm here today to apologize for that letter that I wrote you when your baby died." I said, "I am so sorry for not being more empathetic and kind, and I'm sorry for any pain that caused you." And she got real quiet and she said, "Yes, I remember that letter." She said, "I just threw it away and never gave it another thought." She said, "When I've thought about you over the years, I have thought about the Afghan that you crocheted for me for my wedding present that I still have." I said, "But that's when we lost touch." She said, "Kris, you have to understand, I was just trying to hang on." We talked for the next couple of hours, just catching up on each other's lives, and then every once in a while, she would get up and just hug me and say, "I cannot believe that you're here. This is a sign." When it came time to leave, she walked me out to my car and she said it again, "This is a sign." And I said, You know, you said this a couple of times. A sign of what? She said, I've struggled with depression for many years. You saw my husband is in dire health, and I can't leave the house. But you being here today, just showing up out of the blue, made me think that things could change. She said, you gave me hope. That day certainly took a turn that I did not expect, but I actually walked away with a little hope myself. Thank you.
Thank you, Kris. I think back to an apology I made probably about 40 years ago when I went to a small Christian school. I would have been about 4th grade, I guess, and I knew, it's fitting that it's March because I knew 2 things about the color green. I knew you were supposed to wear it on St. Patrick's Day, and then I also knew that if you were wearing predominantly green, and it meant you were horny. I assumed that had something to do with frogs, like a horny toad. In fact, when I would wear my green jumpsuit, my cousins called me Jodi the Toad. And so I was very surprised when I went to school one day and I was in my PE class and Miss Tyson was wearing an all-green sports athletic wear. So I just shouted out, "Miss Tyson's horny!" She got a really severe look on her face. And she said, "Jodi, you need to apologize right now." "I'm sorry, you're horny." All right, let's bring up another slammer. Bonus points if you're wearing all green. That poor teacher. I think this name is Mark Siegel. Is that Mark? Yes, okay.
This is the first time I've ever been to one of these, and I'm not a public speaker. I also have some allergies, so this is someone else's voice. So I'm a retired physician, so I have a story about my internship. It is not a sad story, nobody dies. But I was an intern in 1985. Some of you may remember that AIDS came out in 1983, and that will play a little bit into part of the story at the end. So when you're an intern, your year is divided up into 6-week rotations. Some of them are on medicine, some of them are in the ER, some of them are in the ICU. The way the programs are set up, you're on a team. So you have a resident, 2 interns, and 4 medical students, and you all share one queen-size bed at night when you're on call. We were on call about every 3rd night, and people would be admitted, and there would be another intern, and we would divide the patients. The resident had to write up everyone, I had to write up my half, another intern wrote up his half. We were also responsible for all the patients on the ward, so before a group went home, they would check out your patients. I wanted to sleep, so I would round on all the patients that were assigned to me. And one night, I come upon a room, and there is a man in severe pain, and he is moaning. And so, because the nurses actually ran our universe, I went and found his nurse to find out what was really wrong with him. And he was a man with sickle cell anemia. I don't know if you all are familiar with that, but it's a disease, it's an inherited disease that affects African Americans. And so I went in, introduced myself, and he said, "Hi, my name is the Reverend Willie Walker." So, not being very astute, I assumed that he was a minister of some sort. He had a collar, was wearing black, and I decided, since I'd never had a patient that had sickle cell anemia, that I was going to take Willie onto my service, which was somewhat unheard of, but I was a bit nerdy. And so the problem was that Willie's team would not give him pain medicine, and Willie was in a sickle cell crisis, which meant that he would either have severe joint pain, chest pain, and basically we didn't have any cures or good treatments. The treatment at that time was hydration, pain medicine. So I said, "Willie, you can come on my service. I'll give you all the pain medicine you want, because pain is very subjective." And we seemed to strike up a good relationship. And I told the administration that whenever Willie was admitted to the hospital, he needed to be admitted to my team, and I would take care of him. So I would rotate off, and then I would hear that Willie was admitted, and he asked about you, and blah, 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 blah. So as the year ended, Willie gets admitted again, and I say hello, examine him, he gets written up, he gets his pain medicine. The nice thing about Willie was he never asked for pain medicine going home. The thing that concerned all of us was that these people were faking it and they were just drug seeking, but he wasn't one of these people. And he was a really nice guy, kind of a beautiful guy, like Smokey Robinson. And eventually one night, the nurse comes up to me, she has a smirk on her face, and she says, "Willie was admitted, and he wants to see you in his room." And so I go into Willie's room, and there are 6 of the most scantily clad, beautiful women I have ever seen. And they are shaking their stuff, and, "Oh, you're Dr. Siegel, you've been taking care of our man," and I'm like totally blown away by this. Well, it turns out, and of course they say, you know, you can have one of us or all of us. Well, it turns out Willie was not a reverend, he was a pimp. So needless to say, and this is how AIDS played into it, we didn't know if you could get it by shaking hands. So I turned like 6 shades of green and ran out of the room as fast as I possibly could. So that's my story.
Well, that was a surprise. I remember being in a recovery room, and I was asleep. Was after an oral surgery, and I was woken up by moaning in the room. And I was like, "Oh, geez, what a drag. Like, I have to share a room with somebody who's moaning." And then I gained consciousness and discovered it was me. Let's do one more slammer, shall we? Oh, our slammer booth is very busy. They're multitasking. That's okay, Natalia's used to handling all things at once. Whoa! It's a jumping bean. Oh, okay. All right. It looks like this might be part of KNiGHT that I referred to earlier, the chess championship, because our next storyteller, I believe, is named Jean. Or Jeans. No, it's Jean. Coming back to Story Night, competitor of Slammer of the Year, along with Michael. Were you guys on the same year? Oh, okay.
So it's been several years now, but I was in a long-term relationship that suddenly took a turn. And it began to unravel. And it took a couple years to really unravel. And during this time, I think I was very ashamed of what was happening in my relationship, and I began to isolate. And I wasn't reaching out to friends or anything. And during that time, my self-esteem also plummeted. It was an interesting time for me. It was very not what I was, and it took a couple years to completely unravel. And then after that, I reached out to some friends, and we started going to the climbing gym on Emerald. It's the Commons climbing gym. And yeah, they're great. But it was like in November, I started going there and hanging out with these two friends. And I saw that they had an ugly sweater contest in December. And this was something that I would be all over in my past life, personality. And my friends weren't available to go that night. But I decided I had like this little green sweater with the elf body on it. And I was just like the head. And I thought I could put like a little harness on it, cut up my little sweatpants and put a harness on it and put a little carabiner, like a keychain carabiner on it with a rope. And so I was like, okay, I'm gonna go by myself. I'm gonna do something by myself. And so I went over there to the Commons. I drove over in December. And I found myself just too scared to go in. And I walked up to the window and I could see people in their ugly sweaters, and I thought, I can't do this alone. I just didn't have the self-esteem to go in there alone. And so I went back to the car, and then I thought again, no, I'm gonna do this. So I walked towards there again, and I think I turned around maybe 2 or 3 times, and I stood in the parking lot and thought, I'm just gonna honor this part of me that's being shy right now and just needs to be alone. And then I thought, no, not gonna do it. This is an ugly sweater contest. This is my thing. So I walk in there, and the man at the counter says, are you here for the event? And I just think, yeah, I am. So he gives me a name tag, and he checks out my sweater. He takes a picture for the contest. And then he says, and we have all these T-shirts that are kind of a little misprinted, so we're just giving them out. So why don't you take a T-shirt home too? And the way that he received me just felt so good. And it made me feel like I just felt so seen and like I was worth getting to know. And then I didn't win the ugly sweater contest. But that experience just sent me on a different trajectory. It changed me. And I started going to the gym maybe 4 or 5 times a week. And I saw him, and I would just think, wow, that guy was so nice to me. And I found out he's one of the owners, and I was like, wow, that's even cooler. And then I just felt like, and then I just started making more friends, making new friends, building community there and in other places like Story. And I thought I need to tell him what a change he made by just being nice to me and making me feel seen and feeling like I was somebody who was worth getting to know. But I kept chickening out, and this went on for months where I would think, okay, I'm gonna tell him today. Today I'm gonna tell him. And then it was like 1.5 years later. And he was about to go on a trip out of the country, and I thought, this is it. But then, like, we'd always get interrupted by somebody, or he'd have to go do something else. And but then when he came back, I was like, okay, I'm gonna do this. I'm gonna tell him. I'm gonna have the courage. So as he was walking out, I was like, hey, I just said, can I ask you for advice? And we're walking, and I say, there's this your guy. There's this guy I know who did something really sweet for me. He was just being himself, but it really changed my life. And if you were this guy, would you want to know? And he's like, of course I would. And I said, well, it's you. And then I went, of course I cried. I was hoping I wouldn't cry, but I cried, and he just was like, he embraced me and was trying to tell me how much I'd changed his life too. But I was like, no, I want to tell you everything about what happened that night and how many times I came back and forth, and the way you received me, how much it changed the way I am now. And now when we see each other at the gym, we just have big smiles and we embrace. And sometimes whoever I'm climbing with will say, who's that? And I'm like, that guy changed my life. So it turns out like my knight didn't come in shining armor, but he came in a climbing harness. Thank you.
Thank you for listening. If you'd like to see the storytellers, in addition to hearing them, this entire show is available on the Story Night YouTube channel. Support this podcast by texting StoryPod to 44321. Story Night is funded in part by the Idaho Commission on the Arts and the National Endowment for the Arts. We also receive funding from the Boise City Department of Arts and History. Thank you to our media sponsors, Radio Boise and Boise State Public Radio, plus our season sponsor, KNiGHT. Podcast production is by Stephen Baldessari. Our theme song was composed by Dan Costello, with guest musicians from the Biotzetik Basque Choir. You can rate and review this show on Apple Podcasts. Please subscribe to Story Night wherever you download your podcast. Have a story? Call the Story line at 208-917-1970 and leave a message, or click the Storytellers tab on our website. Find out how to participate in our live show at storystorynight.org, or visit us on Instagram or Facebook. Thank you for being a part of our story. I'm Jodi Eichelberger.